And she sort of divided it into respecting children, so respecting children's differences and understanding that they come to school with cultural capital and lots of skills and strengths, and making sure that what we do with children relates to who they are culturally, to their identity languages, so that we acknowledge the fact that children are unique, and we make what we deliver to them information that they can relate to. And she also said part of relational pedagogy is making sure that we use constructivism, so that we give children agency and that they have opportunities to plan and to act on their own ideas, supported by loving, responsive adults. And I think over the last 17 years, at least, the early years documentation and policies coming out of the UK particularly have lost a little bit of language of love. And I think that's because somehow we have become uncomfortable talking about love in early childhood education, and the word love has been replaced with caring or caregiving instead. And Dr. Jules Page defined professional love as a means of trying to make it more comfortable for us as educators by saying it's giving children what they need without preference. So showing no preference for one child or another, but just giving children, each and every child, what they need when they need it, which means you will be giving more attention to some children at some points than others, but you're showing no preference for one child over another. And this sort of relational pedagogy really relates to Reggio. So if you're a Reggio inspired setting, I'm sure that Reggio believe that relationships and relational pedagogy is the underpinning of developing children's self-awareness, and that their well-being is only really acquired through their relationships with each other, with their teachers, and with the materials that are on offer. And that sort of also really relates to this concept of Ubuntu, which I don't know if there's any South Africans in the audience, but I hope I'm pronouncing that right, which comes from this beautiful saying, which is, I am because of others, and really highlights that we exist in relation to everybody else. And I love this quote. It's one of my favorite quotes from Susan Harris, which is, relationships are the necessity of life. So we really have to make sure that relational pedagogy is underpinning our early childhood practice, because children need to relate to each other and we need to relate to them, because that's part of social capital. It's we're preparing children to be human beings. So it's, I think, the most important part of our job as early childhood educators. And moving on a little bit to the why. So we know from the influence of Ainsworth and Bowlby's work on attachment theory that young children develop attachment, and they develop it in a multiple of ways, but for the purpose of keeping it brief for tonight, you have secure attachment and then unsecure attachment. And secure attachment happens when you have the 4 S's that you can see in this corner. So when children feel safe, seen, and soothed is a big one. So we know that there is no self-regulation without co-regulation. Children need to be soothed by us. Then they feel secure. And I think it's Tamsin Grimmer has this lovely image at the bottom here where she sort of builds on that theory. And she says that if children feel loved, then they feel empowered, and then they're ready to learn. And I think this is the why of why we're doing it, of course. Obviously, there are other people out there letting us know that relational pedagogy builds social competence, it builds social capital, it helps us embrace diversity. So when we work with children and we value their uniqueness, we're teaching them that they're all seen, they're all equal, and that they're all loved and welcome here. And it's also the basis for emotional resilience and learning, and ultimately independence. So when our children are feeling loved and feeling secure, they're more able to take risks. And one of the things that Tamsin Grimmer says, and I think it's really key to the whole why, is that when we love our children, when we position them in that relationship with us as we have love for them, we keep our practice with their best interests in mind. So we remind ourselves, is this good for our children? Is this developmentally appropriate? Am I protecting the rights of the child by making these decisions about practice and pedagogy? So that's really the sort of the big key whys behind why it's really important. And I'm hoping that you'll be brave enough to turn on your cameras, because I would like to talk to you a little bit about the issue with love. And if not, don't worry, maybe you can just do it with your cameras off. But there are quite a lot of issues around using the word love in early childhood. It makes us feel a little bit uncomfortable. So I was hoping that you'd all be brave enough to answer the following questions with me by putting up your fingers, but you can also type the number in the chat. That might be better. If you can just be really early years with me and make a love heart. We're going to think about love for a moment. So, how comfortable on a scale of 1 to 10 are we at using love to describe the relationship that we have with the children in our care or in our classrooms? Can you put a number in the box? How comfortable do you feel, or show me on your fingers, equally good, at using the word love to describe the relationship you have with your children? I have got some 7s, some 10s, an 8, 9 to 10 now. Oh, I'm sensing that some of this, there's been a change here. 10 didn't used to be. Okay, so some of you are feeling more comfortable with using the word love. Okay, that's actually, I'm really pleased to see those numbers up so high. Yeah, 5, culturally dependent. That's interesting. Maybe we should pick that. Let's pick that apart later when we go into breakout room. Someone remind me of that, because we're going to, one of our questions is about that. Gender dependent perhaps too. And what about, if we go back to the love heart and just have a think again, how comfortable are we at saying to children, when they say to you, I love you, how comfortable are we saying, I love you too? Oh. That's really tough. I can see some 10s, I can see some 3s. Yeah. I think some of us feel like it's the right thing to do, but I think it's really good to be honest with ourselves about how uncomfortable that can make you feel if that's not how you express your love language. And I think Jess is going to talk about love language a bit later. I think I saw it in her slides. I don't know how you could say anything else. Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Thank you for thinking about that with me. Okay, in your current placement, 1, but when you worked in Latin America, you would have said 10. That's interesting that we've got some differences depending on where you're situated. Let's put that in our pockets, and we can discuss that a little bit later when we go into breakout rooms. Okay, so I'm going to stop talking now. And one of the lovely things about this early years group is that we have lots of SIG members, but we also have this wonderful community of people who turn up. And Jess is one of those lovely members of our community who turns up. And the next few slides are going to be Jess sharing her ideas and practice about relational pedagogy with you. So you don't just have to listen to me, but you can get some real hands-on tips from an educator inside the classroom. And I just want to tell you a little bit about Jess. So I think Jess's journey in early childhood education started about 2007. And she was working with a key stage 1 and the early years focus. She's done an MA in early childhood studies and early childhood education. And she's worked in a range of settings, so schools, but also with parent and infant groups. And now Jess has had her own children. I think it's fair to say that concept of relational pedagogy has really come to the forefront in her practice. She's got a heightened awareness of it now. I feel the same way. And Jess is now in Poland working as a phase leader, going from nursery to year 1. So I'm going to hand over to you, Jess. Thank you very much for taking over and presenting the next few slides for us.
Thank you. It was really interesting, Lynsey. And it's interesting you mentioned about how comfortable are you about saying that you love someone, because love the children, because I've heard that mentioned so many times. And I do agree. It's something society's made us feel really awkward about, which I think is a massive shame. I'm sure this wasn't the case years ago. And I know safeguarding has its place, but I feel professional love is very different. And they are, very young little people that need our love and support, and they need to hear it, I think. So this is a really interesting conversation, and I'm really happy to be part of it. So for me, I've been in quite a few international schools now, and I kind of take my ethos with me in every school. And I think as a teacher, the longer you teach, or perhaps if you're very strong from the start, I don't know, I had to do a lot of learning before I really knew who I was in the classroom. You do have a way of teaching and working with the children. So for me, when I go to a new class and I start thinking about how I'm going to set it up, I try to see it from their perspective, from the children's perspective. So I often do a questionnaire or similar to find out from parents what the children really like, and then obviously a lot of observation, and then start setting up things that they enjoy. And I'm really cautious about taking away things they enjoy. I prefer to develop it rather than take it away. For example, the start of the year, I might have some colouring sheets, but then I might develop that towards term 2, even in term 1, but having some sort of how to draw different things step by step, which is obviously developing their drawing skills more. But I mean, if the children ask for colouring sheets again, I will put some in, because I think that really has to be their space as well as yours. And I feel if you really value what you're putting in the classroom with them, you talk to them about it, their self-esteem rises as well, because you're letting them have voice and agency. So particularly continuous provision, I think it should be something you do discuss with the children regularly. I started doing a weekly assembly, which basically we talk about what is working well in the classroom, what they enjoy, what new things they might like within reason, of course, because I have to explain we can't buy every single thing they want. And I've started it again this year with my class, and actually they were quite surprised that I was asking them these questions, and I had to give them lots of suggestions to get it started, because I'm not sure they're used to being asked those questions, and I always explain, and particularly this helps with tidying up and looking after our resources, that they need to care for their things in the classroom because it's their classroom. And I do use that word quite regularly. It's not just my space, it's their space as well. And that's just really a way to develop their confidence and their happiness and their well-being within the classroom. We have opportunities to vote. In this slide, you can see there's some little Duplo blocks and there's 2 books. So we would have the children's name on the Duplo blocks, and then they vote. They stick them on top of each other, and the tallest tower wins the book for the day. So they can have the book at story time that they really want. And of course, that feeds in brilliantly to maths, data handling, this kind of thing. But they see that their voice again is important. I'm not always choosing the book for them, for example. one place I worked was an American kindergarten, and what I really noticed about that place was that the staff were genuinely so happy to see the children. Like, the children would walk in, and it was like 4 staff members would run over and just praise them and talk about, just little things about how they had nice hairbands, or they liked the bag or the shoes, or, they were so pleased they were coming in and smiling. And I really observed that, and I thought, in British schools, it's not something I've experienced as much. And I think it's so important, because I think when they're walking into the classroom and they see you, they're still just thinking about their mums and dad and leaving them, and they need to feel some warmth from you as well. So I make that really important a part of how I work, and especially now as phase leader, I'm on the front door welcoming all the children in from reception and nursery. And as I used to have reception, I know a lot of those children as well, and it's so lovely to see their faces when you give them that kind of welcome. And I think it's really important to really try to do that, especially just entering the classroom. I try, well, I think I actually am not even trying. It's the idea of being really excited about what they're excited by and what they're doing, as well as things you're showing them. I mean, often I think we can expect to sit down and maybe we've got shaving foam out or something, and we expect them to be excited because we think it's quite exciting. But I think if you reciprocate that with children and be really excited about things they're telling you or stories they've drawn out on paper and really curious, it shows it's kind of a relational pedagogy. You're learning from each other and you're interested in each other. And I feel it's something that comes quite naturally to me, but I think it can be, more difficult for other people, or they have to really act this way. And I hope that obviously all you guys, you are genuinely excited by what the children are showing you and doing, because I think that again raises their self-esteem and their happiness at being near you and having you as their teacher. And also, like I said, try to bring some excitement into the classroom and outdoors when you're with them as well. When they're learning well, I think it's really important to point it out regularly and point out what they're learning and how fantastic that is, how interesting that is, and even comparing, oh, last week you couldn't draw the princess, but today I see you're doing it. Again, to raise their self-esteem, but also to refer to something you've seen them do before, and then they know that you're interested in them. And not even just learning, like I might refer to a sister or a brother or something they told me previously, so they know that when they were talking to you before, you were actually listening, and you think they're interesting. Because I think young children, particularly with the amount of questions and the amount of time, the hours they talk for, perhaps at home they're not listened to a huge extent. So I try to fill in those gaps for them. When I play with them, I try to, I ask first, is it okay if I'm playing with their model, for example, or similar, I'll ask permission to play. I won't just touch their things. I again think that's really respectful. If I'm playing alongside, that's a bit different. So I ask permission, and then I sort of model how we should talk to each other when we're playing. So, I might say, can I put one brick on here? Is it okay with you? These kind of things, or can we extend this? Can we build a ramp? What do you think? Rather than just charging in and making the changes. I think that's really, really important, because when we model working like that with children, other children will work like that too when they're playing. I also think with play, to be respectful to them, it's very important. They have a right to say no. If they don't want you to play with them, I say to them, it's okay, you say no. Like maybe you want to play by yourself, or maybe you're having a really nice time with a friend. I don't take offense to that. I mean, children will show you in very obvious ways, of course, by like turning away from you, or they might not actually say no. But if I get those signals, I won't bother them and I'll move on. Because again, that's just being really respectful to their rights as individuals, that they don't have to always interact with me. I think above all else, as Lynsey has said, connections and relationships are absolutely everything. I don't think you can actually teach before you have all of those going on. I have quite a slow move to my curriculum, especially at the beginning of the year. I don't rush anything, and I will really justify that with anyone who asks, because I feel until we've got them ready for learning and comfortable with us, there is no point teaching. you know, aspects of things like the phonics, for example, you know, like I will start it when I think the children are ready and we have good relationships and the classroom is calm and a happy place to work. And another point I'd say is make an effort to talk to every child in your classroom, even if it's a comment that you're making about something they're doing. They may not respond. I mean, we're all in international schools. A lot of our children are EAL. I'm quite used to children not responding. So sometimes I just acknowledge what they're doing. Like I say, you know, something similar. Oh, you know, you're making a drawing again today. I saw your drawing yesterday. It was really nice. You know, these sort of things. Just so they have that little bit of bonding with you. So, and that is way easier, I think, in international schools because usually we have smaller class sizes. Lynsey, I'm on the next slide, if that's all right. Just going to move now. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just checking that. Yeah. So I say here, develop a class ethos, a caring class. For me, I've managed to do this in my schools by really having, when we first decide how we're going to work together as a class, one of our main rules is being kind. And I think that's an excellent overarching rule because it can relate to everything. And if I choose to have some sort of reward strategy, it will be for being kind. And I will always point out to children when they're being kind and exactly what they're doing. And I will also model it. So, for example, if the children are tidying up, I will start tidying something up and I'll say, I'm being kind, I didn't play with this, but I'm happy to tidy up to help my friends in the classroom. And I think it's just using that language a lot really, really supports them and constantly pointing out kind behavior. A few years ago, I used to have this, I still have the gorilla, but I used to use the gorilla as sort of a teaching point. And basically, he was very scared to come in the classroom, and the children had to work in different ways to make him feel welcome, including making a house for him, all these kinds of things. And this really, having this caring aspect for something, even if it was a stuffed gorilla, really helped the class ethos. I've also done kindness trees before as well. I know that used to be in the old PSHE for Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2, but I think it's a lovely concept where you build a tree, and if you can do a little, basically draw around their hand for the leaf, and if someone's kind, they can draw a little picture of who was kind and put it up on the tree. And that's worked for me in particularly challenging classes that we've just really focused on for 15 minutes every day on who's been kind, and they make these leaves, put them up, and it's turned the class around quite quickly. As we all work with multilingual learners, I think it's really, really important as well that we're particularly kind to those learners. I think home language is so important, and I really advocate for this within at home with parents, but also bridging between the two languages. If you have a native speaker in your classroom, when you're teaching, I ask for some translations so the children can understand. Whenever the children are upset, I always think use the native language. It's very, very important. We don't want them to feel worse because they can't communicate something in English. So to me, that's really, really important in international schools. I always make sure I have extended play sessions as well. I know we probably all do because we're EYFS and we know how important it is. So again, I'm not telling them to break up models or stop painting their picture because I have a circle time I want to do. I'm very careful with that. Also very careful about not taking children out of play as well. So if I do the whole class session, then I want to do small groups afterwards, I will make sure I choose the children that are kind of hovering and not in play yet, as much as I can. And I know that is tricky. I make little under construction cards. I think you can see it up on the right-hand corner. So again, if they're building something like a model or even a large scale model, we put that on. Then the children know not to tidy that up because they see the sign. And again, that's just respectful for their work. And they can actually move their models up on the side where we put our models and keep it for the day as well. So they know they can go back to it. It's not going to be broken up. And I think that helps them feel really secure. In my routines as well, I try to allow some choice. So for example, we're doing dough disco and get squiggling right now. So I'll say to the children, okay, we're going to choose one of these two things. We need to do it today. you know, who would like to do get squiggling, who would like to do don't disco. We take a vote, and then they choose, and then we have the highest number, then we'll choose the activity. And that's really popular, and I think giving them that choice makes them more willing to want to do it. And I guess it feeds into maths with tallies and all this kind of thing. I constantly reflect on the children and their well-being. I think that's really important. So what I mean by that is I look at, oops, sorry, I look at how they're coming into the classroom, how they're feeling on that particular day. And also we have a feelings chart which we check in on, and I think you can just see it in the picture, the second picture down, and we have 5 frames and 10 frames under there, and they have a photo, so they check in every day and they know they can move it. So in first circle time, I'll look at that very closely, and any children who are in angry, upset, worried, then I try to talk to them very quickly after circle time to see what's bothering them. And it has revealed quite a lot for me, including safeguarding before. So I really think this is very, very important. And of course, if a child moves in the day, I can check on that as well. And the last point, which Lynsey was talking about, is I read quite a bit from Tamsin Grimmer, and I worked with her a little bit on case studies. I love the idea of the love tokens. I never understood this until I read her book, which was very useful, about the things children give you and they're showing their love. So they might make you a picture or give you a stone. And sometimes, and I've got to admit it, I used to be like, oh, thanks, and put it on the side. But now I'm like, wow, this is lovely. Example, I'll put it up on the wall, or oh, I'll take that home with me. And actually, sometimes I've given them back. So I found example, I had this little boy who was drawing me pictures, and I knew he loved pirates at the time, and I was in the resource cupboard and I found a little chest, a little pirate's chest. So I went down and I saw him and I said, I found this and I thought of you straight away, and I wanted to give it to you for the classroom because I know you love pirates. And his face just lit up. And it's just being really thoughtful like that. I think it goes so far with children. It means so much to them, and it's not a big deal for us to do. So in summary, that's all I really want to mention. There's many more things, but I don't keep you too long, but I hope you get some ideas from that. And I'm looking forward to the chat in the breakout room soon.
Thank you, Jess. That was amazing. All those different ideas. And yeah, just to build on that love language thing. I mean, if anybody we've got a Padlet and it's got all the books and lots of research and resources in it. So please check it out. But Tamsin's book is also in there as a recommended read. And I love that she talks about that children have all these different ways of saying I love you. And some children like to be touched and like you to touch them. Some children give you tokens, and some children just like affirmation verbally. So it's also really good to just find out how your children show love. How do they show it to you? How do they show it to their peers? And how do they want it back from you? Because we're all different. My husband, for example, does not like a cuddle, whereas I'm a very cuddly person. So I think you have to find out how you show love, how people show love, and how children show love, and really approach that sensitively. And that, I think, links really well to the questions. And we've had lots of sort of talk about that cultural aspect. So when we go into breakout rooms in a moment, I think we should keep that in mind and talk about that as well. So we're going to break into breakout rooms, and we've got 3 questions to discuss today. And depending on how many people we've got, we will allocate 1 question to each breakout room. So our questions today are: what does a loving pedagogy look like in your setting? So this is just an opportunity to really share some good ideas. And I would like to ask that we have 1 note taker from each breakout room so that we can fill the Padlet with good ideas from each other, because that's why we're all here. We're here to magpie all those brilliant ideas and share good practice together. And then the second question: how can we develop environments that honour our multilingual and multicultural learners? And by that, I don't just mean classrooms, but I mean the whole environment, the whole practice. So let's go back to some of those things that we raised earlier about being in a different culture, having different cultures in our classroom. How do we deal with that when the expression of love might be different from our expression of love. And then the third one, and this is a biggie, and the SIG debated a little bit about this, is safeguarding. What about safeguarding? When we're talking about love and we're allowing love to come into early childhood education, and we're not talking about romantic love, of course, and I think that's where some of the confusion and danger lies in this. But what are the issues with safeguarding? How does it make us feel? Do we have any concerns? And how might we address these so that love can be in existence safely in our early childhood settings? Thank you so much for the wonderful conversation. As always, it's like the best part of these sessions is just getting in those breakout rooms and hearing what everybody has to say and learning from each other's practice. Can I ask group one to be brave enough to nominate someone, or maybe you nominated someone already, or if not, maybe John can talk about what group one discussed in terms of what does loving pedagogy look like in your settings.
Happy to share. I don't know if John wants to share, but I was in group one too.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Gretchen. We talked about, just examples from our settings. I think universally we do things like greeting children in the morning, at the building door, at the classroom door. We talked about, talking, giving kids a chance to share about themselves, part of the routine. So we talked about, my school, we do that at morning meeting. We, at Priya's school, they have like a feelings chart and they check in that way. We also talked about, or we had a discussion about like touching children and how, it's a part of our job when we work with young kids. And we talked about, asking for consent, as they say. And not only is that good practice for us as adults, it also models for the kids that that's, a nice way, like, can I have a hug, or would you like a hug, or can I help you in the bathroom? Just, it takes 2 seconds, and it's not 100% of the time feasible, but that came up as well. Priya, I'm sure there's more, so feel free to jump in, but we talked about, I don't know, I feel like that took up most of it, but I did step out for 30 seconds in the middle, so maybe I missed something.
I think everybody in the group felt that being connected with the children, and there was a couple mentionings of not only in our direct classroom, but particularly as administrators to make it real a neighborhood in a sense, and the classes would know each other and children could talk to any adult and feel comfortable.
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really, really important, isn't it? Oops. We were group 4, Andres and I, and Andres was making lots of really wonderful comments. I was writing them all down, and he was talking literally about the importance of keeping down with the kids, like what are children interested in now and how that's changed so much. And we were talking about how that, like, who knew that you would be Googling K-pop and trying to find out, those songs that children are singing and those people that are influencing their lives, and YouTube influencers and who are important in their lives, and trying to make those connections. And Andres is a Spanish teacher, so you can jump in too, Andres, but he was talking about how he basically is trying to engage the head, the heart and the body to his subject, which is Spanish, so that children are really loving his teaching and the language of Spanish as well. Yeah, so we had a really interesting chat, and while we were talking, and Andres was talking about noting all of their interests, I remembered something that I just wanted to show really quickly. It's just a little book, but this is one of the best tips I've ever been given, and it was given to me by a friend who was a sergeant major in the army. and they keep notebooks on all of their, I don't know what you call them, soldiers. And I literally have one page per child, and I write things like, who is their favorite Paw Patrol character? You know, what do they like to do, like love puzzles? Or if mummy tells me, you know, that they love Peppa Pig, that I'm writing all these things down so that I have that connection information with them. So yeah, that was us. Moving on to the second question, I think that was Jess, you were in that group. I don't know if you nominated anyone to speak, or you'd like to speak for your group, or anyone in group 2.
We didn't nominate. I can hold for a minute in case anyone wants to talk, but I'm not sure. Okay, I'm happy to. I think it was quite a shy group. So we came out with some very interesting things that I haven't thought about, but actually completely makes sense, because it's come to me, especially this year moving to Poland, pronouncing the name correctly. So when you get your name list, checking how to say every name. I think that's really important, because there's nothing worse, I think, when the teacher gets it wrong. I've had it in my past as well. So I like that one. One person said we should use the first language of the child until they're comfortable enough in English. And I think that's a really interesting one. And then she said, you know, when they reach the stage of perhaps other children in the class, then bring in more English. And I think that would be very caring. Be aware of all the other cultures in the class and respect and acknowledge others' festivals. We can be aware when there's special dates, and also we can even teach those as teachers. I think it's really important to open the minds of the whole of the kids in the class, and be more accepting. We had wait a while when you ask questions, and rephrase and paraphrase questions, and use visual prompts, rechecked on understanding for those children that can't understand English too well initially. This is also a really interesting one as well. Allow certain religious artifacts and things such as henna, and don't make the children feel bad for having those things, because we can have school policies that, of course, don't allow necklaces and things, but if they're religious, just shouldn't be mentioned whatsoever. And there was my one from earlier, just about using the dual language when it supports children emotionally, but also when you're teaching academic concepts is really good for multilingual learners. That was everything.
That's amazing. And just a little plug there, just in connection to what you were saying about identity languages, home languages. ECIS also has a MELI group, so a multilingual language. Oh, I can't remember the acronym. Multilingual Learners Special Interest Group. And if you check out the ECIS website, they also do lots of sessions on translanguaging and how you can bring the home and identity language into the classroom, and lots of strategies you can use. So please check out that SIG and what they have to offer as well. Charlotte, were you also discussing that in your group, that question?
Lots of sort of similar things, lots of overlap, talking about using pictures and gestures to support children who are new to English so that they can understand and feel safe in the environment, having multicultural and multilingual books available in your classroom, particularly if you can match them up to the learners you have. We talked about, like Jess said, having maybe days either linked to festivals or things like United Nations Day or Mother Tongue Language Day, where you're celebrating different cultures, different languages. We also talked about being aware that when you're using those images, and I know Xenia talked about trying to use real photos rather than cartoons, but also being aware that the children in your class are represented in those images. So it's not just all, I gave the example of working in Sweden, not just having only photos of children who are blonde-haired, blue-eyed, traditionally Swedish, because that's not the only children in our classroom. And I think that covers most of what we'd said, unless Xenia or Angeline want to jump in with anything.
I think it's good already. You mentioned everything.
Thank you. And then the final group, that was group 3. Sarah, were you in that? Was anyone in that group with you?
We had a bit of a difficulty. One of our people in our group we couldn't hear or see, and but I gathered from this that she joined another group, so that's great. And the other person was in a car and couldn't. It was a bit dangerous to be talking, so I got thrown out.
Oh, okay.
I've loved listening to this. Thank you.
No, that's no problem. Yeah, does anybody want to chip in about the safeguarding, or what issues we might encounter, or how we might address those? I know that in previous schools I've had male TAs who were a bit uncomfortable about having children sit on their laps for obvious reasons, but were happy for them to sit next to them. Charlotte, did you have any issues from a sort of leadership point of view?
Yeah, I think because I was the one who sort of thrown this question into the mix as a tricky one to bring up. I think sometimes we have the people who are not trained as teachers, maybe our learning assistants, our security guards, our lunch supervisors, who need clear guidance or support in putting those boundaries in, not to limit the love, but to be clear about what's acceptable and what's not. And I know, having sort of done recruitment before for either lunch supervisor or a learning assistant position, and talking through, what would you do if this child had done X, Y, Z, and just getting, I'd just go and give them a great big hug and kiss them on the head, and giving them the strategies to know what's kind of considered safe touch, and to have clear boundaries to protect themselves and protect the children. Not to not have the love, but to know where the line is drawn. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think somebody already said the word consent, and I think that that's kind of the biggest takeaway from this, isn't it? Is, and as well that love language, we don't all speak the same love language, so we have to be culturally competent in our decision making about how we approach it with different children, and all the time be aware that we as adults require consent, and so do children. They have the right to say no. I think it's been mentioned here as well, like Jess said. I think they have the right. I don't give children cuddles. Children give me cuddles, I give them cuddles back. And if they ask for a cuddle, that's a different story. I think that's kind of where we need to position ourselves. So I'm open to receive love and cuddles, but I don't go looking for it. And I think that goes back to that definition as well about professional love being giving to what children need, but showing no favoritism. So you're not seeking out children. You're just open to everybody, and asking for consent. Sarah, did you want to say something?
I'm going to just piggyback on that, because I think it's so valuable, because it's all about relationship, learning how that works. And in cases where teachers are seeking out the love, as it were, there is a safeguarding concern there, but there's also the emotional element of children who feel sought out, and the favoritism, and those who feel left out, and the confusion there. So I'm really glad you brought that up, and I'm glad that this was a point of the 3, because it is a controversial or difficult thing to be talking about, but I think it's brilliant that you included it. Thank you.
Can I add on one more thing too? Is that okay? Do we have time?
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it.
Okay. The other thing that this question made me think of is that, just on the complete flip side, when we do have these meaningful relationships with children, they're going to feel much more comfortable coming to us if they have a problem, a safeguarding issue, but any problem that they need an adult's help to solve. So I think that is a really positive thing that comes out of these relationships with kids.
Yeah, it's kind of turning the negative to the positive, isn't it? When I was doing the research for this presentation, I stumbled across research from America that said a third of all American children have unsecure attachments to their main caregiver. And the biggest unsecure attachment is actually dysregulated attachment, which is where they experience terror from the person that they're supposed to get the most love from. So there's one reason why this is so important, is that we can correct those attachment issues if we are showing them that they are worthy of love and we make good attachments with them. And of course, Gretchen, you're absolutely right. When that happens, when we make relationships with children, then of course they're going to feel safe and secure, and then naturally reporting does happen. But how wonderful if, in a way, that children are secure and safe enough to be able to do that with you. Thanks everybody so much for tonight, and please add to the Padlet. Please access the Padlet. It's got some research on there. There's some resources. There's also some name games, because we talked about the significance of names, but every time a child hears their name, oxytocin is released. It's so important. It's so important that they know each other's names. So there's a list on there as well. And you'll see the books that a lot of the information has come from tonight listed there. Please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And please email me if you have a special interest or a talent that you would like to speak about, just like Jess did this evening. Or perhaps there's something that you would like us as a SIG to go out and find more information about, go find speakers about. And don't forget, if you haven't signed up, we've got a conference in Doha, 24th and 25th of November, and I hope to see lots of you there. And if not, please look at the website. We've got more Connect and Converse coming up. Our next one will be led by Bia, and she will be talking about inclusive environments, so how we can make sure that we're meeting the needs of all of our learners. Thank you so much for coming this evening.
Thank you both.